Margaret Thomas, born in 1814 in Wales, was the second of a child born to a large family. Her father was Thomas William, and her mother was Mary Ann James. And I just went onto FamilySearch and looked under memories and found many stories about this marvelous lady. And today I'm just going to tell you 2 stories about her, but just know there are so many more out there. I'm going to entirely skip their living in Wales, where they, after they joined the LDS Church, got extreme persecution. It took them 10 years to save the money to come to the United States. They lived in New York for a year during the Civil War. The oldest 4 children took after their father, who was a shoemaker, and worked making boots for the Civil War Union soldiers. And the youngest 4 went to school. And so we'll just skip the train ride where they went to Florence, Nebraska, after New York, where all their belongings were burned into the luggage car. We'll skip the trek across the West until they arrived in the Salt Lake Valley. Those are stories for another time. But today I'd like to tell you about a story from Henry John's descendant named Ethel Roderick. And this is what she said about Margaret Thomas John's wife. Margaret Thomas John was called an angel of mercy. She was always ready to leave her work and run to help with sickness. With the blessings of healings in her hands, she lovingly toiled among the people, sharing her joys, her tears, and her song. No one knows how many babies she delivered, but it was many. And she taught her daughters well. They could do all of the household tasks pertinent to girls at that time. They learned to take wool, clean it, dye it, spin it into yarn, and then knit it into clothing. Her youngest child, Mary Jane John, told this little story about her parents. They entertained Chief Pocatello from the Shoshone tribe and his several brothers many times. She remembers the first visit when these men came to her parents' home and of the terrifying experience. Chief Pocatello came to the door and demanded food, and Margaret told him, "Yes, I will feed you." And then she immediately began making biscuits and preparing a meal like those she fed her family. Her children were so afraid of this great Indian and his brothers because they had heard the news of some of their bad deeds. As Margaret saw the fear in her children's eyes, she said gently, "Don't be afraid, and above all, don't let them know your fear." On average of once a week, the Indians came, and each time they were treated as guests. At this house, they learned to sit down at the table, use a knife, fork, and spoon, and the Indians learned to call the children by name, and they were very kind to each of the children. They even learned to call their parents by the same names the children used, Papa John and Mama John. So this legacy of Papa John and Mama John kind of began at the first Thomas John and Margaret reunion in 1883 in Portage, Utah. It was held at their house, and it was a dinner and a program, and about 70 people attended. And Margaret was asked to give some remarks. And she basically just stood up and said that she was very thankful for all those present, for the great respect they showed to her. And then, in conclusion, a descendant of William John, her name was Marie Webster, said this at a Daughters of the Utah Pioneer meeting: "If it hadn't been for my ancestors, such as the Johns, accepting the true gospel of Jesus Christ when they heard it in their native land and were willing to make the necessary sacrifices to come to Utah, what would my life have been like? Because of their sacrifices, I am able to enjoy all the comforts of life and the blessing of religious freedom." So I just want to say thanks today, along with you, to Papa John and Mama John.